I lost my apartment in one night. When I called my mother, she said it was not their problem. I thought that was the worst part, until the insurer revealed my parents were the beneficiaries on a policy I never signed. 3 days later, a fire investigator asked who had been inside my home the previous week. I knew the answer, but I needed the truth to walk in wearing its own shoes before anyone would believe me. My name is Madeline Knight. I am 32 years old, and up until 3 nights ago, I lived a life defined by careful, curated order. I lived in a corner unit on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Ridgehaven, Colorado, a town where the wind comes off the mountains with enough bite to freeze your breath in your throat. I liked the cold. I liked the structure of my job at Glassline Risk Solutions, where I spent my days analyzing probabilities and minimizing exposure for corporate clients. I was good at predicting disasters for other people. I was professional, solitary, and fiercely independent. I had built a fortress of quiet routines to keep the chaos of my upbringing at bay. But risk assessment is a fragile shield when the disaster is already inside the house. The end of my life as I knew it did not begin with a bang. It began with a screech. It was 4:17 in the morning when the smoke detector above my hallway door stopped being a plastic disc on the ceiling and became a weapon of sonic warfare. I woke up not to consciousness, but to adrenaline. There is a specific kind of confusion that happens when you are ripped from deep sleep by a life-or-death alarm. For a second, you think it is part of a dream. Then you smell it. The smell was not like a campfire or a fireplace. It tasted like burning plastic and melting insulation. A chemical acridity that coated the back of my tongue instantly. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the hardwood floor, and immediately coughed as a gray tendril of smoke curled under my bedroom door. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. That was it. No wallet, no keys, no shoes, just the instinct to connect to the outside world. I opened the bedroom door and was hit by a wall of heat that felt physical, like a shove against my chest. The hallway, usually a dim corridor painted a soothing cream color, was unrecognizable. The air was thick, churning with black smoke that hovered just below the ceiling like a storm cloud. At the far end, near the kitchen, there was a glow. It was not the warm flicker of a candle. It was an angry, pulsing orange light that was eating the drywall. I did not think. I ran. My bare feet slapped against the cold concrete of the stairwell as I fled. I remember the sound of my own breathing, ragged and harsh, louder than the sirens that were just beginning to wail in the distance. I remember passing Mrs. Gable on the 2nd floor, who was clutching her cat carrier and wearing a floral robe, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. We did not speak. We just moved. A herd of frightened animals driven by the primal need for oxygen. When I burst out of the front doors and onto the snowy pavement of the parking lot, the cold air hit me like a slap. I collapsed onto the curb, gasping, my lungs burning as if I had swallowed hot coals. I looked up. My living room window shattered. It happened in slow motion. The glass blew outward, raining down like glittering diamonds, followed immediately by a tongue of flame that licked up the side of the brick facade. I watched my life burn. I sat there, shivering in a thin, oversized t-shirt and pajama shorts, watching 7 years of accumulation turn into carbon. My laptop, containing the entire risk analysis project I was due to present on Monday, was melting. The cello I had played since high school, the one thing that always calmed my anxiety, was snapping under the heat. The box of photographs under my bed, the only physical proof that my grandmother had existed and loved me, was turning to ash. It was a total erasure. A firefighter, a man with soot smeared across his cheekbones and eyes that looked too tired for the hour, approached me about 20 minutes later. He draped a heavy, rough blanket over my shoulders. "Miss Knight?" he asked. I nodded, unable to find my voice. "I am sorry," he said, his voice flat with professional sympathy. "It looks like a total loss. The structure is compromised. We are containing it so it does not spread to the adjacent units. But your apartment there is nothing savable in there." Total loss. The phrase hung in the freezing air. I looked at the phone in my hand. It was the only thing I had left. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I needed someone. I needed to hear a voice that anchored me to the world. A voice that would tell me it was going to be okay, that I was alive, and that was what mattered. I called my mother. It rang 4 times, then 5. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. "Madeline?" Her voice was groggy, thick with sleep. "It is 4:30 in the morning. What is wrong with you?" "Mom," I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. "Mom, the apartment. It's gone." "What?" This time, it was Gordon, my stepfather, shouting from the background. "Who is it? Is it her again?" "It's the fire," I said, my voice rising in hysteria. "There was a fire. My apartment burned down. I'm outside. I don't have anything. I don't have shoes. Mom." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It lasted for 3 heartbeats. I expected a gasp. I expected the sound of bedsheets rustling as they jumped up to find their car keys. I expected her to ask if I was burned. "Well," Lorraine said, her voice sharpening, shedding the sleep instantly. "I told you that place was a fire trap. You probably left a candle burning. You are always so careless with your atmosphere. Madeline." I stood frozen on the sidewalk. The heat from the burning building was radiating against my face, but I had never felt colder. "I didn't leave a candle burning. Mom, I'm standing in the snow. We are 2 hours away." "Madeline," Gordon's voice came through the speakerphone, loud and irritated. "What do you expect us to do? Drive down there and watch the embers? That is what insurance is for." "I just needed to tell you," I stammered. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You are a grown woman," my mother said. 32 years old. Figure it out. Call a hotel. Do not drag us into your drama in the middle of the night." "But this is not our problem." "Madeline," she said. The words were distinct, clipped, and final. "Handle your mess. We have an early day tomorrow." The line went dead. I stared at the screen. The call had lasted less than 60 seconds. They had not asked if I was injured. They had not asked if I had inhaled smoke. They had simply severed the tie. "Not our problem," the phrase echoed in my head, drowning out the roar of the water hoses and the shouts of the fire crew. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, a hollowing out that was far more painful than the smoke inhalation. I had always known my relationship with Lorraine and Gordon was transactional, strained, and distant, but I had thought, in a true crisis, there would be a baseline of humanity. I was wrong. As I stood there, watching the black smoke obscure the stars, a memory surfaced. It pushed its way through the shock and panic, unbidden and unwelcome. 5 days ago, my mother had come to visit. It was an anomaly. Lorraine hated driving into the city. She hated my apartment building, which she called pedestrian. But she had called me on a Tuesday, her voice sweet and airy, saying she was in the neighborhood for an appointment and wanted to stop by. I had been touched. I had rushed home from work early, bought a decent bottle of wine, and tidied up. When she arrived, she didn't sit down. She didn't take the glass of wine I offered. Instead, she walked through the apartment. She walked slowly, touching things. She ran her hand over the back of my sofa. She opened the closet door in the hallway and stared at the circuit breaker panel for a long moment. She went into the kitchen and looked at the stove. "You have a lot of things, Madeline," she had said, standing in the middle of my living room, looking at my cello in the corner. "It's my home." "Mom," I had replied, trying to keep the mood light. "Home," she had repeated, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. It wasn't a smile. It looked like calculation. She looked like an appraiser walking through a foreclosure. She looked like she was taking inventory. At the time, I had brushed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my own insecurities onto her awkward attempt at bonding. But now, standing in the wreckage of that very room, the memory felt like a splinter under my fingernail. Why had she really come? Why had she looked at the smoke detector in the hallway with that intense, quiet focus? I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge the thought. It was crazy. It was trauma-induced hysteria. My mother was cold. Yes, she was narcissistic. Absolutely. But she was not a monster. Hey, a soft voice broke my spiral. I turned to see Hannah Pierce standing there. Hannah was a colleague from Glassline, but she was also the only person in Ridgehaven who knew that I took my coffee with oat milk and that I was terrified of thunder. I must have texted her in my days after hanging up with my mother, though I didn't remember doing it. Hannah didn't ask questions. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She just took one look at my shivering form, took off her own heavy down coat, and wrapped it around me over the firefighter's blanket. "Car," she said firmly. "Now." She guided me to her Subaru, cranked the heat up to 80 degrees, and handed me a thermos of tea she must have grabbed on her way out the door. "You're staying with me," Hannah said, her hands tight on the steering wheel as we pulled away from the flashing lights. "Guest room is already made up. Don't argue. I have sweatpants and I have wine. We deal with the rest when the sun comes up." I leaned my head against the cold window and watched the reflection of the fire fade in the side mirror. I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it made my throat ache. This was what family was supposed to look like, not shared DNA, but shared burden. "I just need to call the insurance company tomorrow," I whispered, more to myself than to Hannah. "I have a policy. It covers temporary housing. It covers replacement costs. I just have to file the claim." "We will do it together," Hannah promised. I closed my eyes. I told myself that the worst was over. I had lost my things, but I had my life. I had my job. I had insurance. I could rebuild. I would file the paperwork, get the check, and find a new apartment. I would move on. I would forget the coldness in my mother's voice. I truly believed that the fire was the tragedy. I believed that the flames were the end of the story. I did not know that the fire was just the opening act. I did not know that by the time the sun set tomorrow, I would be wishing I had stayed in that burning building. I did not know that the call to the insurance company would not be a lifeline, but a trap door dropping me into a hell I never could have assessed in any risk model. The fire took my past. The next 48 hours were coming for my future. The days following the fire were not measured in hours but in waves of nausea and numbness. I was living in a strange limbo, a ghost haunting the guest bedroom of Hannah Pierce's townhouse. I woke up staring at a ceiling that was not mine, painted a shade of eggshell blue that felt aggressively cheerful compared to the charcoal ruin of my life. I was wearing Hannah's clothes. That was a specific kind of humiliation I had not anticipated. Hannah was 3 inches shorter than me and possessed a style I would describe as artistic bohemian. I was squeezed into a pair of yoga pants that ended at my shins and an oversized sweater that smelled like lavender detergent. It was a sensory constant reminder that I was no longer Madeline Knight. The independent risk analyst with the curated apartment, I was Madeline Knight, the charity case. I tried to return to work on Tuesday. It was a mistake. I sat at my desk at Glassline Risk Solutions, staring at spreadsheets that detailed actuarial tables for flood zones in Florida, and the numbers swam before my eyes. My colleagues were kind, but their kindness felt heavy. They tilted their heads when they spoke to me. They lowered their voices. I was the woman who had lost everything. I was a walking tragedy, and my presence made them uncomfortable because I was a reminder that stability is an illusion. I needed to normalize this. I needed to turn the catastrophe into paperwork. That was how I processed the world. You identify the variable, you assess the damage, and you file the claim. During my lunch break, I stepped out into the stairwell to call my renter's insurance provider. I had been with the same company, Beacon Shield, for 5 years. I paid my premiums automatically. I had never filed a claim. In my head, this conversation was going to be the turning point. I would speak to a representative. They would express sympathy. They would cut a check for emergency housing and content replacement, and I could go buy my own underwear. Beacon Shield, this is Timothy speaking. How can I help you? Hi, Timothy. My name is Madeline Knight. My policy number is on file. I need to report a total loss due to fire. I expected the gasp. I expected the scripted empathy. Instead, I heard the click of a keyboard, then silence, then more typing. "Miss Knight," Timothy said, his voice shedding its customer service warmth and becoming professionally neutral. "I see the incident report from the fire department was uploaded this morning. We were expecting your call." "Okay," I said, leaning against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. "So what is the next step? Do I send you an inventory list? I have receipts for the major electronics in my email cloud." "Actually," Timothy said, "we cannot process this over the phone. There's a flag on your account regarding the payout structure. We need you to come into the local branch. Are you able to come to the office on 4th Street tomorrow morning?" I frowned. "A flag? What kind of flag? I am just the policyholder." "It is a standard renter's policy. There are some discrepancies regarding the claimant details that need in-person verification," he replied. He sounded like a robot reciting a terms of service agreement. "We have an opening at 9 in the morning. Can you make that work?" "Yes," I said, my confusion morphing into a low-grade anxiety. "I can be there." I hung up the phone and stared at the screen. Discrepancies. Claimant details. It made no sense. I was the claimant. I was the only person on the lease. That evening, Hannah and I sat on her living room floor eating takeout noodles. I told her about the call. Hannah paused, a forkful of pad thai halfway to her mouth. She was a data analyst at Glassline, and her brain worked much like mine, suspicious of outliers. "That is weird," Hannah said. "Renter's insurance is not like life insurance. You do not usually have a beneficiary unless it is a specific rider for death or severe injury. The money is supposed to replace your stuff. Why would they need to verify who gets the money? It is your stuff." "Maybe it is because the amount is high," I suggested, grasping for logic. "I had the contents rider for the musical instruments and the electronics. Maybe they think I'm trying to commit fraud." Hannah narrowed her eyes. "Did you sign anything recently? Did you update the policy limits?" "No," I said. "I haven't touched that policy in 2 years." "Check the app," she commanded. I pulled out my phone and opened the Beacon Shield app. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt a strange resistance, a physical reluctance to look at the history. It was the same feeling you get before opening a medical test result. I navigated to the Documents tab. There it was, 4 months ago. A PDF labeled Policy Update and Beneficiary Designation Form. I stared at the date. October 12th. I tried to remember where I was on October 12th. That was a Tuesday. I was at a conference in Denver. I definitely was not sitting at my computer updating my renter's insurance to add a beneficiary designation. "There is an update," I whispered. "From October." "Who did it?" Hannah asked. "It doesn't say who. It just says processed." I put the phone down on the coffee table as if it were radioactive. My mind began to race, cataloging every person who had access to my personal information, my social security number, my policy number, my mother's maiden name. The list was short. There was me. There was the file cabinet in my apartment, which was now a pile of ash, and there were my parents, Lorraine and Gordon. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. My mother knew my passwords, or at least, she used to, years ago, when I was in college. She had insisted on having them in case of emergency. I had changed most of them, but not all. And she knew the answers to my security questions. "What was the name of your first pet?" "Barnaby." "Who was your favorite teacher?" "Miss Higgins." Lorraine knew those answers because she had been there. "You don't think," I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. The accusation felt too large, too grotesque. It was one thing for my mother to be cold. It was one thing for her to say, "Not my problem," when I was homeless. But to tamper with a legal document, to insert herself into a financial contract, that required premeditation, that required malice. "You need to call her," Hannah said softly. "Don't accuse her. Just poke the bear. See if she growls." I waited until Hannah went to the kitchen to pour more wine. I needed to do this alone. I walked out to the small balcony, hugging Hannah's oversized cardigan around me. The air was crisp. smelling of snow and exhaust. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and chirpy, a stark contrast to the icy dismissal of the night of the fire. "Madeline, we were just talking about you. How are you holding up, sweetie?" The endearment felt like a slap. Sweetie, she hadn't called me that since I was 6. "I am okay, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am staying with a friend. I just wanted to update you." "Oh, good. Gordon and I were so worried. We didn't know if we should come down. But you know how Gordon gets with his back, and the drive is so long." Lies. All of it. They hadn't called once in 3 days. "It is fine," I said. "I am dealing with the logistics. Actually, that is why I'm calling. I have to go to the insurance office tomorrow. There is some weird paperwork issue." I held my breath. I listened to the silence on the other end. "Paperwork?" Lorraine's voice didn't spike. It didn't drop. It just became very, very still. "What kind of paperwork?" "They said there was an update to the policy a few months ago," I said. Lying by omission. "They need to verify some signatures. I was wondering if you remembered seeing any mail come to the house for me? Maybe I used your address by mistake?" It was a bait. I hadn't used their address in a decade. "No," Lorraine said quickly. Too quickly. "We haven't seen anything. Why would you think that?" "Just checking," I said. "It is going to be a hassle. I just want to get the check so I can find a new place." "Well," Lorraine said, and then she paused. "Madeline, has the police department called you?" The question came out of nowhere. It landed between us like a grenade. "The police?" I asked. "Why would the police call me? The fire department said it was likely an electrical surge." "Oh, of course," Lorraine said, her voice pitching up, regaining that fake airy quality. "I just saw on the news. They always talk about investigations. You know how thorough they are. I just wanted to make sure they weren't harassing you while you are so vulnerable." She was terrified. I could hear it in the tremor of her breath. She wasn't asking because she was worried about me being harassed. She was asking because she wanted to know if anyone was looking at the cause. "No police," I said, my hand gripping the balcony railing so hard my knuckles turned white. "Just the insurance adjuster." "Good," she said. "That is good. Focus on the insurance. Madeline, get that sorted out. You need the money." "Yeah," I said. "I do." "We love you," she said. "Bye, Mom." I ended the call and stood there in the dark. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic, bird-like rhythm. She had asked about the police, my mother, who had not asked if I had burns, who had not asked if I had a place to sleep, had specifically asked if the police were investigating. I went back inside. Hannah looked at me. I didn't say anything. I just sat down on the sofa and pulled my knees to my chest. "It could be a misunderstanding," I said aloud. I was saying it for myself, not for Hannah. Maybe she just helped me organize it months ago and I forgot. I was stressed at work in October. Maybe I asked her to handle it. "Madeline," Hannah said gently, "you don't let anyone handle your finances. You balance your checkbook to the penny every Sunday." She was right. I was a control freak. It was my survival mechanism. I would never have let Lorraine touch my insurance policy. The doubt was no longer a vague shadow. It was a solid, cold weight in my gut. Someone had changed my policy. Someone had set it up so that money would flow in a specific direction, and then, my apartment had burned down. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fire. But this time, in my nightmare. The fire wasn't an accident. I saw the flames licking up the curtains, intentional and hungry. And standing in the corner of the room, watching it burn, was a figure I couldn't quite make out. I woke up at 5 a.m, unable to lie there any longer. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, trying to wash off the phantom smell of smoke. I dressed in the most professional outfit Hannah could lend me, a gray blazer that was too tight in the shoulders and black slacks that were too short. I needed armor, even if it was ill-fitting. I drove to the Beacon Shield office in downtown Ridgehaven. The building was a monolith of glass and steel, reflecting the gray winter sky. I parked the car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My intuition, that quiet inner voice I had ignored for years in favor of keeping the peace, was screaming at me. It was telling me to turn around. It was telling me that once I walked through those doors, I couldn't go back to being the victim of a tragedy. I would become something else. I would become a witness to a crime. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dark, hollowed out by exhaustion. I didn't look like a warrior. I looked like a woman who was about to break. But I got out of the car. I walked across the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my borrowed boots. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the insurance agency. The air inside was conditioned and smelled of copier toner and stale coffee. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, not looking up from her screen. "I am Madeline Knight," I said. "I have an appointment." She looked up then. Her eyes flicked over my ill-fitting clothes, but she didn't comment. "Have a seat. Mr. Henderson will be with you shortly." I sat in a stiff chair, my hands folded in my lap. I felt like I was waiting for a biopsy result. I felt like I was waiting to be interrogated. The door to the back office opened. A man in a suit stepped out. He didn't smile. "Ms. Knight?" he said. "Come back." I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I walked toward him, and with every step, the sense of dread grew louder. I wasn't just walking into an office. I was walking into the truth, and I was terrified of what it was going to say. "Mr. Henderson's office was a vacuum of sound. The carpet was a thick, industrial gray that swallowed the noise of my boots, and the walls were lined with certificates that promised security, protection, and peace of mind. I sat across from him, my hands gripping the armrests of a chair that was designed to be uncomfortable enough to keep meetings short. He did not offer me coffee. He did not ask about the fire. He simply opened a manila folder, the tab crisp and sharp against the mahogany desk, and slid a document toward me. "Ms. Knight," he began, his voice dry as parchment. "Before we proceed with the claims process, I need you to verify the current structure of your policy, specifically, the amendments made in October." I looked down at the paper. It was a standard policy declaration page. I saw my name, Madeline Knight. I saw the address of the apartment that no longer existed. I saw the coverage dates. "I do not understand," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I did not make any amendments in October." Henderson did not blink. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a pair of reading glasses, and settled them on his nose. "Please turn to page 4. I flipped the page. The paper felt heavy, like it was weighted with lead. Page 4 was the beneficiary and payout designation section, usually for a renter's insurance policy. This section is blank or defaults to the policyholder. The money is meant to replace the couch, the clothes, the laptop. It goes to the person who lost the things. But this page was not blank. In the center of the page, under the header, Primary Beneficiaries, were 2 names typed in clear, bold Arial font, Lorraine Parker, Gordon Parker. Beside their names was a percentage, 100%. I stared at the numbers. They looked alien. I blinked, hoping they would rearrange themselves back to 0, but they remained fixed. My parents, my mother, who had told me my homelessness was not her problem, and my stepfather, who had complained about the drive. They were not just bystanders to my tragedy. They were the intended recipients of it. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "I did not authorize this. Why would I make my parents the beneficiaries of my personal property insurance? If my things burn, I need the money to replace them. This makes no sense." "Look at the bottom of the page," Henderson said. He was watching me closely, his eyes narrowing slightly. He was assessing me. He was trying to decide if I was a victim or a co-conspirator. I looked. There, on the signature line, was my name. Madeline Knight. The room seemed to tilt. The signature was in blue ink. It had the right loops. The M started with the sharp peak I always used. The K in Knight had the little flourish at the end. To anyone else. To Mr. Henderson. To a judge. To a casual observer. It was my signature. But I knew the rhythm of my own hand. I knew the pressure I applied when I crossed my T. I knew that when I signed my name, I did it in one fluid, rapid motion, resulting in a slight slant to the right. This signature was upright. It was careful. It was drawn, not written. There was a microscopic hesitation at the top of the D, a tiny pool of ink where the pen had paused for a fraction of a second while the writer checked their work. It was a hesitation of thought, not muscle memory. It was a forgery. And it was a forgery that could only have been executed by someone who had spent decades watching me write, someone who had signed my report cards, someone who had access to every birthday card I had ever sent. "That is not my signature," I said. My voice sounded hollow, as if it were coming from someone else in the room. Henderson leaned back in his chair. "It matches the signature on your original application from 5 years ago perfectly. In fact, the handwriting analysis software flagged it as a 99% match." "It is a forgery," I insisted, pushing the paper away as if it burned my fingers. "And look at the coverage amount. Why is it so high?" I had always carried a standard policy, $20,000 for personal property, enough for IKEA furniture and a decent wardrobe. But the document in front of me listed a high-value contents rider. It listed specific items: a vintage cello valued at $12,000, professional recording equipment, antique jewelry, high-end electronics. The total payout limit had been raised to $75,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did own a cello, but it was a student model worth maybe $2,000 on a good day. I did not own antique jewelry. I did not own professional recording equipment. "I do not own these things," I said, looking up at Henderson. "This is fraud. Someone increased my coverage for things I do not have, and then designated themselves to receive the payout." "Ms. Knight," Henderson said, his tone hardening. "This form was not submitted online. We require in-person verification for beneficiary changes on policies exceeding $50,000. This form was submitted right here, at this branch, on October 12th. The date I was in Denver. "I was out of town," I said. "I can prove it. I have flight records. I have hotel receipts." "The agent who processed this," Henderson interrupted, ignoring my alibi, "noted that the policyholder came in personally. She described a woman, roughly your height, perhaps a bit older, wearing a scarf and sunglasses. She said she was in a rush. She said she was updating the policy because she was traveling for work and wanted to make sure her parents were covered if anything happened to her apartment while she was gone." A woman, a bit older, wearing a scarf and sunglasses. The image of my mother flashed in my mind. Lorraine loved big sunglasses. She wore them to the grocery store. She wore them to avoid eye contact, and she had a drawer full of silk scarves. "The woman," I said, my voice trembling. "Did the agent say anything else about her?" Henderson consulted his computer screen. "The notes say the customer was very charming. She apologized for being in a hurry. She said she was helping her daughter get organized because her daughter was too busy with her career to handle the details. She brought donuts for the office." Donuts. My stomach turned. It was such a specific, Lorraine-esque detail. She weaponized charm. She used small gifts to disarm people, to make them skip the protocol, to make them check the box without looking too closely at the ID. She would have walked in here, smiled, complained about her busy executive daughter, and the agent would have seen a caring mother helping out. They wouldn't have looked at the birth date on the ID closely. They would have seen the resemblance, because everyone always said we had the same jawline, and they would have stamped the form. "It was not me," I said again, but the words felt weak. "That was my mother. She impersonated me." Henderson did not look convinced. He looked tired. "Ms. Knight, you have to understand how this looks. A policy is increased. A beneficiary is added. 4 months later. A fire occurs that results in a total loss. And now, the policyholder claims ignorance. He paused, then dropped the second hammer. This morning, Henderson said, lowering his voice, our Special Investigations Unit received a call. I froze. A call from who? From the fire investigator assigned to your case, he said. A Mr. Jonah Mercer. The name hung in the air. Jonah Mercer. I had not met him yet, but his name sounded like a judgment. Why would he call you? I asked. Because, Henderson said, he found certain irregularities at the scene, and when he ran a background check on the property, he saw the recent policy changes. He advised us to freeze the claim pending a full arson investigation. Arson. The word was not spoken, but it screamed from the silence. They thought I did it. They thought I had conspired with my parents to inflate the policy, burn down the apartment, and split the $75,000. I did not burn my apartment, I said. Standing up, my legs were shaking so hard I had to lock my knees to keep from collapsing. I lost everything. I was asleep. I almost died. We will see what the investigation yields, Henderson said coolly. He closed the folder. Until then, Beacon Shield cannot release any funds. Not for the hotel, not for the clothes, not for the loss. He pushed the photocopy of the forged document toward me. You may keep that for your records. I took the paper. It felt toxic. I walked out of the office, past the receptionist who was now typing furiously, past the security guard who watched me with suspicion. I stepped out into the biting cold of the parking lot. The sky was a flat, oppressive white. The world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but the axis had shifted. I wasn't just a victim of a random tragedy anymore. I was a pawn in a game I hadn't known I was playing. I looked down at the paper in my hand. The signature, Madeline Knight, mocked me. It was a paper-cut betrayal, thin and sharp. My mother hadn't just stolen my identity. She had stolen my safety. She had bet against my life. She had calculated that the payout was worth more than my trust, worth more than my home. And the worst part? She had done it with donuts and a smile. I got into my car and threw the folder onto the passenger seat. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to breathe, trying to force oxygen into my lungs, which felt like they were constricting. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I stared at it. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to drive until the gas ran out, but the screen lit up with a text message. It was from a number I did not recognize. Area code 303. I picked it up. Ms. Knight, this is Jonah Mercer. Fire investigation. We need to talk. I am at the coffee shop across from your office. 10 minutes. He knew where I was. He knew my schedule. And he knew about the policy. I looked at the insurance building, then at the text. The circle was closing. My parents had set the trap. The insurance company had sprung it. And now, the man who hunted the truth was coming to examine the wreckage. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to run. If my mother wanted a war, she was going to get one. But first, I had to survive the investigation. I had to face the man who had looked at the ashes of my life and decided that something didn't smell right. I typed back 2 words, I'm coming. I pulled out of the parking lot, the forged signature burning a hole in the seat beside me. The accident was officially over. The crime scene was just being defined. The coffee shop was one of those industrial chic places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, filled with the low hum of espresso machines and people typing on laptops. It was the kind of place where I used to sit on Sunday mornings to organize my week. Now, it felt like a neutral ground in a war zone. Jonah Mercer was sitting at a small table in the back corner. He did not look like a police officer, and he did not look like a bureaucrat. He looked like a man who spent his life sifting through debris. He was wearing a canvas jacket that had seen better days, and his hands, resting on a closed notebook, were rough and scrubbed clean, but stained with the faint, permanent shadow of soot. He had a face that seemed carved out of granite, sharp angles, deep lines around his eyes, and an expression of absolute, unshakable focus. I approached the table. He didn't stand up. He just gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Ms. Knight," he said. His voice was gravelly, low, and devoid of the fake sympathy I had been drowning in for 3 days. "Sit down." I sat. I didn't take off my coat. I felt cold, a bone-deep chill that the coffee shop heating could not touch. "You texted me," I said. "You said we needed to talk. The insurance adjuster said you called them." Jonah Mercer looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were a pale, piercing gray. They didn't scan me for injuries. They scanned me for lies. "I called them," he confirmed, "because I have a problem with the narrative, Ms. Knight. And when I have a problem with the narrative, I pause the money." "The narrative?" I asked. "The story the fire tells," he said. He opened his notebook. The pages were filled with tight, angular handwriting and sketches that looked like architectural blueprints gone wrong. Fires tell stories. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Most accidental fires differ from intentional ones in rhythm. He turned the notebook toward me. It was a sketch of my living room floor plan. There were arrows and dark-shaded areas. "The initial report suggested an electrical surge from the power strip behind your entertainment center," Jonah said. "That is the lazy answer. It is the answer you give when you want to close the file and go home. But I don't like lazy answers." He tapped the paper with a pen. "I spent 4 hours in your unit yesterday. Electrical fires burn in a specific way. They arc. They melt wire insulation from the inside out. They leave beading on the copper. I checked your outlets. I checked the breaker box. Ms. Knight, the wiring in your wall was intact until the fire consumed it from the outside." I stared at the sketch. "So it wasn't the outlet?" "No," Jonah said. "The fire didn't start in the wall. It started near the wall, on the floor, and it started hot, fast. Accidental fires usually smolder. They give you a warning, a smell, a flicker. This fire?" He snapped his fingers. The sound was sharp in the quiet cafe. "This fire decided to eat the room in under 3 minutes." "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am saying I found traces of an accelerant pattern," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Not gasoline, nothing that obvious. But the burn patterns on the floorboards show a localized intensity that defies gravity. And I found something else, a remnant of a timer mechanism, a cheap plastic smart plug, the kind you control with an app." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I use smart plugs." "For the lamps, this wasn't connected to a lamp," Jonah said. "It was fused to a heating element that had no business being behind a sofa. Someone rigged a device to ignite at a specific time, 4:17 in the morning, the time when deep REM sleep is heaviest, the time when a person is least likely to wake up." He leaned forward, crossing his arms on the table. The space between us felt charged with a terrifying clarity. "I do not believe this was an accident. Ms. Knight, this was a scheduled event." I couldn't breathe. "Someone tried to kill me." "Or they didn't care if you died," Jonah corrected. "Which is often the same thing in my line of work. Now, here is the question that matters. The question that decides if you are the victim or the suspect." He looked me dead in the eye. "Who had access to your apartment in the last week?" My mind flashed instantly to the list. It was a short list, a pathetic list. I lived a solitary life. I didn't have parties. I didn't have a cleaning service. I didn't have a boyfriend who had a key. "Just me," I said. "I have the only key." Jonah didn't write that down. He just waited. He knew there was more. He knew because he had seen the hesitation in my eyes. "And," I started, my voice trembling. "My mother." Jonah picked up his pen. "Your mother? Name?" "Lorraine," I said. "Lorraine Parker. She came to visit 5 days before the fire. It was unexpected. She hadn't been to my place in 2 years." "Did she have a key?" "No," I said. "I let her in. I was with her the whole time." "The whole time?" Jonah challenged. "Did you go to the bathroom? Did you take a phone call? Did you go to the kitchen to get wine?" I remembered the moment in the kitchen. opening the bottle of Pinot Noir, struggling with the cork. My mother had been in the living room. It had been maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes was a long time if you knew what you were doing. I went to the kitchen, I admitted. For a few minutes. Jonah wrote something down. The scratching of his pen sounded like a knife scraping against bone. Anyone else? He asked. Maintenance? Landlord? No, I said. The building has a secure entry. You need a fob to get in the front door and a key for the unit. The fob, Jonah said, nodding. That is good. Electronic logs, digital footprints, people lie. Ms. Knight, they misremember. They cover up. But data? Data is beautifully honest. I am going to pull the entry logs for the main building and your floor for the entire week leading up to the fire. He looked up at me. If someone entered that building who wasn't you, the system will know. And if you are telling me the truth, that log is your best friend, if you are lying. He let the sentence hang there. I am not lying, I said. I felt a sudden surge of desperation to make him believe me. I needed him on my side. He was the only person who saw the mechanics of the crime, not just the tragedy. Mr. Mercer, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the crumpled photocopy of the insurance document Henderson had given me. You need to see this. I slid the paper across the table. Jonah picked it up. He read it in silence. His expression didn't change, but his posture shifted. He sat up straighter. The predator in him had just caught a scent. The beneficiary designation, he said, reading the names. Lorraine and Gordon Parker, 100%. I didn't sign this, I said, pointing to the forgery. I found out an hour ago. My mother or someone pretending to be me went into the insurance office in October and changed the policy. They increased the coverage to $75,000 for things I don't even own. Jonah looked from the paper to me, and for the first time, the hardness in his eyes softened, replaced by a dark, cynical understanding. So, he said quietly, the financial motive has appeared. He placed the paper down on top of his notebook. This changes the profile, he said. If this was just arson for revenge, or a stalker, that is one thing. But this is a business transaction. Someone invested in a policy, waited for the incontestability period, or simply a safe window, and then liquidated the asset. The asset, I repeated. You mean my life? You were just collateral damage to the payout, Jonah said brutally. Or maybe the death benefit was a bonus, if you had died. The money would have gone to them without you there to contest the signature. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit right there on the polished concrete floor. My mother, my own mother. What do I do? I asked. Do I go to the police? Do I confront her? Jonah shook his head sharply. No, absolutely not. You do not confront her. If you confront her now, she will spin a story. She will say you are confused. She will say you asked her to do it. She will say you are mentally unstable from the trauma of the fire. He leaned in closer. Listen to me very carefully. Ms. Knight, arsonists who do this for money are planners. They script everything. If they have gone to the trouble of forging documents and planting devices, they have also prepared a defense. A defense? A character defense, Jonah said. If the physical evidence starts to point to them, their next move will be to discredit the accuser. They will attack your credibility. They will paint you as careless, or hysterical, or suicidal. They need you to be the unreliable narrator of your own life. I thought of my mother's question on the phone. Has the police department called you? I thought of her quickness to call me careless the night of the fire. She was already laying the groundwork. She is already doing it, I whispered. She told me I was careless. She told me it was my fault. Expect it to get worse, Jonah warned. They will try to isolate you. They will try to make you doubt your own memory. This is the pressure cooker phase. They are waiting for the check, and they are waiting to see if the investigation clears. When they realize I'm looking at them, they will panic, and panicked people are dangerous. He tore a sheet of paper from his notebook and wrote down a number. "This is my direct line, not the office line, my cell. If you remember anything, a smell, a conversation, a strange object in the apartment, you call me, day or night." "What about the logs?" I asked. "When will you have them?" "I am going to the management office now," he said. "I will have the data by tonight." He stood up, towering over the small table. He put his notebook in his pocket. "Go home. Stay with your friend. Do not post on social media. Do not talk to your family about the investigation. If they call, be boring, be sad. But do not be smart. Let them think they got away with it for a few more days." "Why?" I asked. "Because," Jonah said, a cold, grim smile touching his lips, "nothing makes a criminal sloppier than confidence." I watched him walk out of the coffee shop. He moved with a purposeful stride, a man on a mission to decode the ashes. I drove back to Hannah's townhouse in a daze. The world felt sharper, more menacing. Every car that passed me looked suspicious. Every notification on my phone made me jump. When I got to Hannah's, I didn't cry. I was done crying. Jonah's cold logic had infected me. I felt a strange, icy calm settling over my panic. It was the calm of the analyst. I was a risk assessor. After all, I dealt in facts. And the facts were that my parents had tried to burn me out of existence for $75,000. I sat at Hannah's kitchen island and opened a new notebook I had bought at a drugstore on the way home. I wrote timeline at the top of the page. I started writing. October 12th. Policy changed. Mother in town? Check flight logs if possible. 5 days ago. Mother visits, left alone in living room/kitchen area. The fire. 4:17 a.m. The call. Not our problem. I documented everything, every conversation, every tone of voice. I was building my own case file. Hannah came home at 6. She took one look at my face and didn't ask if I was okay. She poured me a glass of wine and sat down next to me. "You look different," she said. "I am different," I said. "I'm not the victim anymore. Hannah, I'm the evidence." We sat in silence as the evening darkened outside. The wind howled against the window panes, a sound that usually comforted me but now sounded like a threat. I kept my phone on the table, staring at the screen, waiting. I was waiting for the truth. At 8:45, the phone buzzed. It was a text message from Jonah Mercer. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. The preview showed only the first few words. I unlocked the phone with trembling fingers. The message was short. It was clinical. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever read, because it was proof. It was the anchor I needed to keep from drifting into insanity. "We have the logs," I read the next line, and the air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. "Only 2 entries for your unit in the last 7 days. One was your fob." I stared at the screen. 2 entries. One was mine. The other entry was logged on Tuesday at 11:15 a.m., guest code access, authorized by management for family emergency. The time matched my mother's visit, but the method guest code, she hadn't just walked in when I opened the door. She had used a code. And then, the final line from Jonah. "The log shows the guest stayed inside for 2 hours and 40 minutes. You said she was there for 20 minutes. I dropped the phone on the table. The clatter was loud in the quiet kitchen. 2 hours and 40 minutes. I had been at work until 3 that Tuesday. I had come home early to meet her. She hadn't just visited me. She had been in my apartment for nearly 3 hours before I even arrived. She had been there alone. She had had time to go through my papers. She had had time to plant the device. She had had time to steal the things she didn't want to burn. She had been waiting for me to come home so she could perform the role of the loving mother. All while standing in a room she had already rigged to explode. I looked at Hannah. "She was there," I whispered. "She was there for 3 hours alone." The reality of it settled in. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an invasion. My mother had been a ghost in my home long before she turned it into a graveyard. And now, I had the data. The war had officially begun. The digital log entries from the building security system burned a hole in my mind. 2 hours and 40 minutes. My mother had been inside my apartment alone for nearly 3 hours while I sat at my desk at Glassline, oblivious. I had the smoking gun, or at least the digital footprint of the person holding it, but Jonah Mercer's warning echoed in my ears. Do not be smart, be boring. I had to play the part of the confused, grieving daughter. I had to make them think I was still stumbling in the dark so they wouldn't notice the net closing around them. I sat on Hannah's balcony, the morning air biting at my cheeks, and dialed my mother's number. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the effort of suppressing the rage that was boiling in my gut. Madeline? Her voice was tight. Is everything okay? You are calling early. I am fine. Mom, I said, forcing my voice into a lower, exhausted register. I just wanted to call and say thank you. Thank you? She sounded wary. For what? For visiting last week, I said. I was just thinking about it. It was the last time the apartment felt like a home. I am glad you were there. I am glad you got to see it one last time before it happened. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence where I could almost hear her calculating. Well, she said, her tone softening slightly. I am glad I came too. Sweetie, it was a lovely visit. It is just so strange, I continued, pushing the bait a little further. The insurance investigator asked me about that day. He asked who had been in the apartment. I told him you were there. Of course. I hope that is okay. The softness vanished instantly. Why would he ask that? Why is there an investigator? Madeline? It is standard procedure. I lied. They are just looking into the timeline. Since the fire was so fast, he just wanted to know if anyone noticed anything weird with the outlets. You should not be talking to them without legal counsel, my mother snapped. Her voice was sharp, frantic. Madeline, listen to me. Insurance companies try to trick you. Do not give them names. Do not give them times. You tell them it was an accident and you stop talking. Do you hear me? Mom, why are you shouting? I asked, feigning innocence. I have nothing to hide. It is not about hiding, she hissed. It is about liability. You are so naive. If you keep talking, you are going to mess up the claim. Just stop talking to them until we can get you a lawyer. Gordon knows someone. Okay, I said. Okay, Mom, I will stop. I hung up. She was terrified. She wasn't worried about my liability. She was worried about her own. She knew exactly what investigator meant. It meant someone was looking at the timeline, and she knew her name was on it. I thought that call was the hardest part of my day. I was wrong. The call was just the opening move. My mother realized I was talking to people, so she decided to ensure that no one would listen to me. The assault began at noon. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Clara, my mother's sister. We spoke maybe twice a year, usually on Christmas and my birthday. Maddie, Clara said. Her voice was dripping with a suffocating, weaponized pity. Oh, honey, Lorraine told me everything. I am so sorry. Thanks, Aunt Clara, I said. It has been rough. Your mom is beside herself, Clara went on. She says you are sounding detached. She is worried you are dissociating. Honey, you know, with your history of anxiety, a trauma like this can trigger a break. I froze. My history of anxiety? Clara, I have a stressful job. I don't have a history. There is no shame in it, she plowed on, ignoring me. We just want you to know we support you. If you are hearing things, or if you are confused about what happened that night, it is okay. The mind plays tricks when it is in shock. Lorraine said you were talking about investigators and conspiracies. That sounds like paranoia. Maddie. I didn't say anything about conspiracies, I said, my grip on the phone tightening. I said there is an investigation, because there is one. Of course there is, she said soothingly, like she was talking to a toddler holding a knife. We just want you to get help. Don't worry about the money or the apartment. Focus on your head. I ended the call, my heart pounding. They were seeding the ground. They were telling the extended family I was having a mental break. They were framing my legitimate questions as paranoia. But the real blow came at 2 in the afternoon. I was at my desk at Glassline, trying to focus on a risk model for a construction firm in Ohio. My email chimed, a priority notification. Subject, urgent, meeting regarding fitness for duty. From Human Resources. I stared at the screen, the words blurred. Fitness for duty. In the corporate world, that was the death knell. That was the phrase they used before they put you on involuntary leave or fired you for being a liability. I walked to the HR office in a daze. The HR director, a woman named Karen who had always been kind to me, would not meet my eyes. She gestured for me to sit. "Madeline," she said, clasping her hands on her desk, "we need to address some concerns that have been brought to our attention." "What concerns?" I asked. "My performance metrics are in the top 10%. I haven't missed a deadline, even with the fire." "This isn't about metrics," Karen said uncomfortably. "We received a communication this morning, an anonymous tip line entry. It expressed grave concern about your current mental state. The report stated that you have been exhibiting erratic behavior, making unfounded accusations against family members, and potentially posing a risk to yourself and others in the workplace." The room spun. "Anonymous?" "We have to take these seriously," Karen said. "Given the trauma you just suffered, the loss of your home, it is not unreasonable to think you might be struggling more than you are letting on. The report mentioned you might be suffering from delusions of persecution." Delusions of persecution. "Karen," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Who sent this report?" "It was anonymous," she repeated, "but it contained details about your personal situation that suggest it came from someone close to you who is genuinely worried." "It came from my mother, didn't it?" I asked. Karen flinched. "I cannot speculate on the source, but Madeline, the fact that your immediate reaction is to accuse your mother that aligns with the concerns in the report about family conflict, it was a perfect trap. If I defended myself by telling the truth, that my mother was gaslighting me to cover up insurance fraud, I sounded exactly like the paranoid, unstable woman described in the report. If I stayed silent, I accepted the label. "I am fine," I said. "I am grieving my property, but I am competent. I am not a risk to this company." "We are placing you on administrative review," Karen said. "We need you to see a company-approved counselor before you can return to active casework. We can't have you analyzing risk for clients if your own judgment is compromised." I walked out of the building 15 minutes later. I had been stripped of my work, my credibility, and my dignity in the span of 3 hours. I drove to Hannah's house, pulled into the driveway, and screamed. I screamed until my throat felt raw. Then I stopped, wiped my face, and went inside. Hannah was already there. She took one look at me and poured a glass of vodka. "What did they do?" I told her about the HR meeting. I told her about the anonymous tip. "She called your job," Hannah said, her eyes wide with horror. "She actually called your job to sabotage you." "She didn't just call," I said, pacing the living room. "She used the specific language HR looks for, risk to self and others. Delusions. She knows how corporate structures work. She knew exactly what buttons to push to get me sidelined." "But why?" Hannah asked. "Why destroy your job? She needs the insurance money." "Sure, but why ruin your career?" "Because if I am crazy," I said, stopping in front of the window, "then I can't testify. If I go to the police and say, 'My mom burned my house,' the police will talk to her, and she will say, 'Oh, poor Madeline. She lost her job because of her mental breakdown. She is imagining things,' and she will show them the HR report. She is building a paper trail of my insanity." Hannah grabbed her laptop. "Who has the HR tip line number? Is it public?" "It is on the website," I said. "Anyone can find it." "But the phrasing," Hannah said, typing furiously. "Using terms like fitness for duty? That is specific. Has your mom ever worked in HR?" No, I said. But my stepfather, Gordon, he used to be a union rep. He knows the labor laws. He knows how to get someone suspended. It was a coordinated attack. Gordon provided the terminology. Lorraine provided the emotional leverage. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jonah. Do not react. They are poking the animal through the cage bars. They want you to bite so they can say you are rabid. I stared at the message. Jonah was right. Every time I defended myself, I dug the hole deeper. The only way to win was to stop playing their game and start playing a different one. I need to be calm, I whispered. I need to be the sanest person in the room. You are sane, Hannah said fiercely. You are just surrounded by psychopaths. I need them to believe their plan is working, I said. I need them to think I am broken, but harmless. If they think I am fighting back, they will escalate. If they think I am defeated, they will get sloppy. My phone rang again. I looked at the screen. It was my mother. I took a deep breath. I channeled every ounce of self-control I possessed. I answered. Hello, Mom? Madeline. Her voice was completely different from this morning. It was like honey poured over glass. It was sweet, cloying, and terrifyingly fake. I am so sorry we argued earlier. I was just so stressed. Aunt Clara told me you sounded upset. I am okay, I said, keeping my voice flat. I had a hard day at work. HR put me on leave. Oh, no, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Oh, that is terrible. But maybe it is for the best. You need rest, sweetie. You have been pushing yourself too hard. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded satisfied. Maybe you are right, I said. Maybe I just need to rest. Gordon and I were talking, she said. We hate that you are dealing with this alone at your friend's house. We want you to come over on Sunday, just for a little family meeting. Your aunt and uncle will be there. We just want to support you. We can have a nice dinner, and maybe talk about how to help you move forward. A family meeting, with an audience. I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't a dinner, it was a public performance. She wanted the family to see me broken. She wanted witnesses to my instability. She probably had papers for me to sign. My instinct screamed at me to tell her to go to hell. My instinct screamed to tell her I knew about the log entries and the forged beneficiary form. But then I looked at the notebook on the table where I had written, Jonah, 2 hours and 40 minutes. If I went, I would be walking into a trap, but traps work both ways. If I was in the house, I could see them, I could hear them, and if they were arrogant enough to invite me in, they might be arrogant enough to slip up. That sounds nice, Mom, I said. I would like that. Wonderful, she purred. Sunday at 1. We will take care of everything. You just bring yourself. I will, I said. I hung up the phone. The room was quiet. You are not going, Hannah said. Tell me you are not going to that house. I have to, I said. They think they are inviting a victim to a funeral, but they are inviting a witness to a crime scene. I picked up my phone and texted Jonah. They invited me to their house on Sunday. I am going. Be careful, he replied instantly. Wear a wire. I looked at the screen. A wire. It sounded like something from a movie, but as I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window, my eyes hard, my mouth set in a grim line, I realized my life had become a movie. It was a thriller, and we were approaching the climax. Hannah, I said, do we still have that old dictaphone from the journalism project? Somewhere, she said. Why? Because, I said. My mother wants to tell a story on Sunday. I want to make sure I get the recording. The manager's office smelled of stale coffee and that specific sour odor of damp ash that had permeated the entire neighborhood since the fire. Mr. Alcott, the building superintendent, was a nervous man who clearly wanted nothing to do with police investigations. But Jonah Mercer had a way of making requests sound like commands. The system was updated in November, Alcott said, typing a password into the server tower beneath his desk. High-definition sensors in the hallways and the elevators. We had some package thefts last year, so the owners sprung for the upgrade. It stores 30 days of footage on the cloud. Jonah stood behind him, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the dual monitors. Pull up the third-floor corridor. Tuesday. Start at 11 in the morning. I stood next to Jonah, my hands clenched in the pockets of Hannah's borrowed coat. I felt sick. It was one thing to see a digital log entry that said, guest access. It was another thing entirely to watch the ghost of my mother walking toward the scene of the crime. Here, Alcott said, on the screen. The hallway appeared. It was clean, bright, and eerily normal. The carpet had that geometric pattern I had walked over 1,000 times, at 11:15 and 12 seconds. The elevator doors slid open. My mother stepped out. She was wearing a beige trench coat and the oversized sunglasses I remembered. But there was something else, something I had not seen in my memory because I hadn't been there when she arrived. She was carrying a bag. It was a large black duffel bag, slung over her right shoulder. It looked heavy. The strap was digging into the fabric of her coat, pulling it taut. She adjusted it with a grunt of effort as she walked toward my door. Pause, Jonah commanded. The image froze. Jonah leaned in, his finger hovering over the screen. That is not a purse, Ms. Knight. That is a gym bag. Does your mother work out? No, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She has bad knees. She doesn't go to the gym. Does she usually bring luggage for a casual visit? No. Play, Jonah said. We watched her reach my door. She didn't knock. She punched a code into the keypad, the guest code I had foolishly given her years ago and never changed. The light turned green. She pushed the door open, lugged the heavy bag inside, and closed the door. The screen showed the empty hallway. Fast forward, Jonah said. Go to when she leaves. Alcott dragged the time slider. The digital clock in the corner of the screen spooled forward. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1:30. Stop, Jonah said. Back it up a bit. There. At 1:55, the door to my apartment opened again. My mother stepped out. She was still wearing the trench coat. She was still wearing the sunglasses. She turned and locked the door behind her. She smoothed her hair. She checked her watch. But her right shoulder was level. Her coat hung loose. She was empty-handed. Where is the bag? I asked. Though I already knew the answer, the cold logic in my brain clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. Check the elevator cam, Jonah ordered. Check the stairwell. Check the garage exit. Alcott switched views. We watched my mother get into the elevator. No bag. We watched her walk through the lobby. No bag. We watched her get into her sedan in the visitor parking lot. No bag. She didn't take it out, Jonah said, his voice devoid of emotion. Conservation of mass. Ms. Knight, matter does not disappear. If it went in and did not come out, it remained inside. He turned to me. A bag that size? Roughly 24 inches by 12? That is plenty of space for a few gallons of accelerant, a timing device, and maybe some old clothes to act as a wick. She brought the fire in with her. Ms. Knight. She carried it on her shoulder. I stared at the screen, at the pixelated image of my mother walking away from my apartment with a bounce in her step. She looked relieved. She looked like someone who had just dropped off a heavy burden. She told me she was there for 10 minutes, I said. She told me she just dropped by to say hello. The footage says she was there for nearly 3 hours, Jonah said, and the footage says she left a package behind, a package that conveniently destroyed itself along with everything else. I felt the room spinning. It was premeditated. It wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a desperate act. She had packed a bag. She had driven 2 hours. She had punched in the code. She had set it up. And then she had waited for me to come home so she could hug me in the very room she had turned into a bomb. I need a copy of this, Jonah told Alcott. Now. We walked out of the building 10 minutes later with a flash drive. The winter air felt cleaner than the air in that office, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being suffocated. This is it, Jonah said as we stood by his truck. This is the pivot point. The logs were circumstantial. This video? This is physical evidence of intent, but it is still not enough to arrest her today. A defense attorney would say the bag contained gifts, or old clothes she was donating to you. They would argue the fire was still an accident, and the bag was just fuel. So what do? I asked. We get a shark, Jonah said. You need a lawyer who understands fraud, someone who can tie the bag to the money, because without the money motive, a jury might just think she is a hoarder who left a bag of trash. I knew who to call, or rather, Hannah knew. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown skyscraper. The name on the door read Tessa Wainwright, Esquire. Tessa was nothing like the corporate lawyers I dealt with at Glassline. She was terrifying. She was in her late 40s, with silver blonde hair cut in a sharp bob that looked like it could cut glass. She wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire burned wardrobe. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. She watched the video footage on her laptop in silence. She watched it twice. Then she closed the lid and looked at me. It is compelling, Tessa said. Her voice was cool, precise. But Jonah is right. It is not a smoking gun. It is a smoking bag. We can infer what was in it, but we can't prove it. Not yet. She burned my life down, I said. Is that not enough? In a court of law? No, Tessa said. In a court of law, we need to prove she had a reason to do it. We need to cement the financial motive. The insurance fraud is our strongest lever. Arson is hard to prove because the evidence destroys itself. Fraud? Fraud leaves paper trails that last forever. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. Here's the plan, Tessa said. I am going to subpoena the security logs from the Beacon Shield branch office where the beneficiary change happened. If your mother walked into that office on October 12th, there will be a camera, or a sign-in sheet, or a parking validation record. Mr. Henderson said the agent remembered a woman who looked like me. I said, Memory is garbage, Tessa said, dismissing it with a wave of her hand. I don't care what the agent remembers. I care what the agent can identify under oath. We are going to arrange a photo lineup, and more importantly, I am going to hire a forensic document examiner for that signature. The insurance guy said it was a 99% match, I argued. The insurance guy uses a computer algorithm designed to clear checks quickly, Tessa countered. A forensic expert looks for pen lifts. They look for hesitation marks. They look for the tremor of a hand trying to trace a line rather than write it. If your mother forged that signature, she left microscopic evidence of her own deception. She leaned forward. We need something irrefutable. We need to prove that on the day you were in Denver, she was standing at that counter. Once we prove the fraud, the fire stops looking like an accident and starts looking like the liquidation of an asset. Liquidation, I repeated. That is what Jonah called it, because that is what you are to them right now. Madeline, Tessa said brutally, you are not a daughter. You are a line item, and right now, they are trying to close the account. My phone buzzed on the mahogany table. I looked at it. A text message from my mother. Sunday at 1 o'clock. Don't be late. Aunt Clara is making her potato salad. We are all just so worried and want to see you. Love you. I felt a spike of adrenaline. The love you at the end felt like a threat. She is texting me about the family meetings, I said. Showing the phone to Tessa. Tessa read the text and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator seeing prey wander into the open. Go, Tessa said. What? I asked. I thought you would tell me to stay away. Usually, I would, Tessa said. But they are getting cocky. They think they have won. They think you are the fragile, broken girl who got put on leave by HR. They are inviting you into their territory because they want to solidify the narrative that you are unstable. She tapped the table with her pen. Go to the lunch. Be quiet. Be meek. Let them talk. Let them spin their story. People who think they are safe talk too much. They will try to get you to agree to something. Maybe sign a power of attorney. Maybe agree to a settlement management plan. They will overplay their hand. Jonah told me to wear a wire, I said. Tessa's smile widened. Jonah is a cowboy, but he is not wrong. In this state, one-party consent is legal for recording conversations. If you are part of the conversation, you can record it. Do you have a device? Hannah has a digital recorder, I said. Tape it to your body, Tessa commanded. Not in your purse. Purses get moved. Purses get searched. Tape it to your skin. And Madeline? Yes? Do not lose your temper, she said. No matter what they say, no matter how much they lie, if you scream, you prove them right. If you cry, you prove them right. You need to be a stone. You are there to gather intelligence, not to win an argument. The argument happens later. When I put them on the stand, I left Tessa's office with a retainer agreement signed and a battle plan in my pocket. I walked out into the city, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked at the text from my mother again. We are all just so worried. I finally understood what Sunday was. It wasn't a lunch. It wasn't an intervention. It was a show trial. They had invited the aunts and uncles to be the jury. They had prepared the script where they were the suffering. Supportive parents and I was the tragic, mentally ill daughter who needed to be managed. They were going to use this lunch to strip me of my agency so that when the insurance money came, they could control that too. I hailed a cab. I needed to get back to Hannah's. I needed to find that recorder. And I needed to practice being a stone, because on Sunday, I wasn't just going to dinner, I was going undercover. Friday morning brought a cold, gray drizzle to the city, the kind that slicks the streets and makes the world look like a smudge of charcoal. I sat in Tessa Wainwright's conference room again, but this time, the atmosphere was not one of desperate scrambling. It was the calculated silence of a hunting party checking their ammunition. On the polished mahogany table, a large monitor displayed a high-resolution scan of the signature on the forged insurance document. To the naked eye, my naked eye, it looked like mine. It had the same slant, the same loop on the capital M, but Tessa had blown it up to 400% magnification, turning the ink strokes into highways. Do you see this? Tessa asked, pointing a laser pointer at the top of the letter D. Right there. That little pool of ink, I leaned in. It looks like a dot. It is a hesitation mark, Tessa said, her voice clinical. When you sign your name, Madeline, you do it in a burst of muscle memory. Your hand knows the path. You do not think about where the pen goes next. But a forger? A forger is drawing, not writing. They have to look at the reference, then look at the paper. Their hand stops for a fraction of a second while their brain processes the next curve. That stop allows the ink to bleed into the paper fiber just a little bit more than usual. She moved the laser to the cross of the T. And here, see how the line is slightly shaky? We call that a tremor of deceit. It is the friction of a hand moving slower than natural speed. My forensic document examiner is prepared to testify that this signature is a simulation. It is a very good one, but it is a simulation. So we can prove I didn't sign it, I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. We can prove it was forged, Tessa corrected. But to pin it on your mother, we needed to place her at the scene of the crime being the insurance desk. She clicked a remote, and the screen changed. It was a grid of 6 photos. Women with similar features, similar ages. My mother was number 4. We brought the clerk from Beacon Shield in this morning, Tessa said. The one who processed the change. We showed her this lineup. We didn't prompt her. We didn't tell her who we were looking for. Did she pick her? I asked, my heart hammering. She hesitated at first, Tessa said. She said the woman was wearing big sunglasses and a scarf, but then she asked if she could know what perfume the woman was wearing. I closed my eyes. Gardenia and musk. Heavy. Tessa nodded slowly. The clerk said the customer smelled like an old funeral parlor. She said it was overpowering, and she remembered the voice. She said the woman called her sweetheart in a way that made her feel small. When we played a clip of your mother's voice from a public social media video, the clerk identified her immediately. She picked photo number 4. We have a sworn affidavit. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The paper trail was solid. My mother had walked into that office, smelling of her signature scent, and stolen my identity with a smile. The door to the conference room opened, and Jonah Mercer walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He was wearing the same canvas jacket, and he was carrying a clear plastic evidence bag. He tossed it onto the table. It landed with a dull thud. Inside was a blackened, melted lump of plastic and metal prongs. "What is that?" Hannah asked. She had been sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes. "That," Jonah said, pulling out a chair and sitting down heavily, "is the bridge between a bad accident and a felony. The lab finished the analysis on the debris I pulled from behind your sofa." He tapped the bag. "It is, or it was, a smart plug, cheap brand. You buy them in a 2-pack for $20. You plug it into the wall. You plug a device into it, and you can control the power from an app on your phone. You can set a timer. You can turn it on from the other side of the world." "I don't use those," I said. "I don't trust the cybersecurity." "Exactly," Jonah said. "But someone plugged this one in, and they plugged a heating element into it, maybe a hot plate, maybe a modified coil. They set the timer for 4:17 in the morning. Then they walked away. They didn't need to be there to light the match. They let the Wi-Fi do it." "The coward's match," I whispered. "We traced the batch number," Jonah continued, his voice grim. "This specific lot was shipped to a hardware chain 3 weeks ago. We narrowed it down to the stores in the region. Most people buy these online, but our arsonist bought this one in person." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a printed still from a security camera. It showed a checkout counter. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. Standing at the register was a woman. She was paying cash. She was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, but the coat was distinctive, a beige trench coat. "That is the store on Elm Street," I said, recognizing the logo on the wall behind the cashier. "That is 5 minutes from my mother's house." "Paid cash," Jonah said. "Thought that made her invisible, but she scanned a loyalty card for a discount, a loyalty card registered to Gordon Parker." "Oh my God," Hannah said. "They saved 50 cents on the murder weapon and got caught." "Greed," Tessa said, leaning back in her chair with a shark-like smile. "It is always the greed that gets them. They couldn't resist the points." "So we have her at the insurance office." I counted on my fingers. "We have her buying the device. We have her entering my apartment with a bag and leaving without it. We have the device in the ashes." "There is one more thing," Hannah said. She opened her laptop and turned it toward us. "I did what you asked. Maddie, I went through the raw data of your cloud storage. I looked at the login history for your password manager." I felt a cold shiver. My password manager was the key to everything. "There was a successful login on October 11th, Hannah said. "The day before the insurance policy was changed. The IP address resolves to a residential connection in Ridgehaven. My parents' house," I said. "She guessed your master password," Hannah said softly. "Or she knew it." "I used a variation of an old phrase we used to say," I admitted, feeling a flush of shame. "I thought it was clever. I thought it was obscure." "She used it to get your insurance credentials," Hannah said. "She logged in, checked the policy number, and then went to the office the next day to execute the change. It was a digital reconnaissance mission." The silence in the room was heavy. The picture was complete. It wasn't just a fire. It was a complex, multi-layered operation involving identity theft, cyber intrusion, fraud, and arson. It was a conspiracy. "This is enough," I said, looking at Jonah. "This has to be enough to arrest them." "It is," Jonah agreed. "I submitted the affidavit for the search warrant and the arrest warrants this morning. The judge is reviewing them now, but it is Friday. The courts are slow. We might not get the signatures until Monday morning." "Monday?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "But the lunch is Sunday." "Which brings us to the strategy," Tessa said, taking charge of the room again. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She wrote one word in red marker: control. "Why is your mother calling a family meeting?" "Madeline?" Tessa asked. "Why invite the aunts and uncles? Why now?" "To embarrass me," I said. To show everyone I am unstable. That is part of it, Tessa said. But that is just the theater. What is the goal? The goal is the money. The insurance company has frozen the payout because of the investigation. Your mother knows that. She knows she can't get the check yet, so she needs to make sure that when the check does come, she can control it. Tessa drew a line from control to a new phrase. Power of attorney. She is going to ambush you, Tessa said flatly. She is going to frame it as love. She will say you are too traumatized to handle the legal battle with the insurance company. She will say you are mentally fragile. She will have a document ready. A temporary guardianship or a power of attorney for finances. She will ask you to sign it, just so we can help you. Sweetie. I felt sick. It made perfect sense. If I signed that, they could negotiate with the insurance company on my behalf. They could settle the claim, take the money, and put it into an account I couldn't touch. She will do it in front of the family so you feel pressured, Hannah added. If you say no, you look ungrateful and paranoid. If you say yes, you sign away your life. So I don't go, I said. You have to go, Tessa said. We need one final nail in the coffin. We need them to admit, on tape, that they are trying to manipulate the situation. We need them to lie to you while you are recording them. It goes to intent to defraud. It destroys any defense they might have about misunderstanding the policy. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small, flat device. It looked like a credit card. This is a high-fidelity digital recorder, Tessa said. It has a 12-hour battery life. You are going to tape this to the small of your back, under your clothes, in Colorado. As long as you are a participant in the conversation, you can record it without their knowledge. It is fully admissible. I took the device. It felt cold and heavy, like a weapon. What do I do? I asked. You play the role they wrote for you, Tessa instructed. You be quiet. You look tired. You let them talk. When they bring out the papers, you do not sign. You ask questions. You ask, why do you need this? You ask, why was the policy changed? You get them to lie on the record, and then, when they push you to sign, you say you need to think about it and you leave. And if they get aggressive, I asked, Jonah will be parked down the street, Tessa said. If you don't come out in 2 hours, or if you send the distress signal, he kicks the door down. I will be listening, Jonah said. We can set up a live feed, but the recording quality is better on the device. I will be 1 block away. You are not alone in there. I looked at the 3 of them. Hannah, my chosen family, Tessa, my sword, Jonah, my shield. I had lost everything in the fire, but I had gained an army. Okay, I said. I will do it. I spent the rest of Saturday preparing. It felt less like getting ready for a family lunch and more like preparing for a tactical insertion behind enemy lines. I chose my clothes carefully. I wore a soft, oversized sweater that made me look smaller, more vulnerable. It also concealed the recorder taped to my lower back. I wore no makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes stand out. I wanted to look like the broken victim they expected. Hannah helped me tape the device. The adhesive was cold against my skin. Test 1, 2, I whispered. Loud and clear, Hannah said, checking the levels on the companion app before we disconnected the Bluetooth for safety. It is recording. Sunday morning arrived with a blinding, mocking sunshine. The sky was a brilliant blue, the kind that made the snow sparkle. It was a beautiful day for a betrayal. I drove my rental car to the suburbs. The familiar streets of my childhood rolled by. The park where I learned to ride a bike, the high school where I played cello, the ice cream shop where my mother used to take me when she wanted to apologize for something. It all looked like a set on a movie lot now. False, hollow. I pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial house. There were 3 other cars there. My Aunt Clara's minivan, my Uncle Dave's truck, and my parents' pristine sedan. The house looked perfect. The American flag fluttered on the porch. A wreath of dried winter flowers hung on the door. It was the picture of suburban stability. I turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 thump. I touched the small of my back. Verifying the recorder was there, I closed my eyes and visualized the evidence: the black duffel bag, the melted smart plug, the forged signature, the login logs. They were not my parents. They were targets. They were suspects. I was not their daughter. I was the informant. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and opened the car door. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the snow. I didn't ring the doorbell. I still had my key. I unlocked the door and stepped into the warmth of the hallway. The smell hit me instantly: roast beef, yeast rolls, and my mother's gardenia perfume. It smelled like home. It smelled like a lie. Maddie! My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She beamed at me, her eyes crinkling with a delight that didn't reach her pupils. "You made it!" she cried, rushing forward to envelop me in a hug. I went stiff in her arms. I felt her heartbeat against mine. It was steady, calm. She was hugging the daughter she had tried to incinerate, and her heart wasn't even racing. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice quiet, just as we practiced. Come in, she said, ushering me into the living room. "Everyone is waiting. We are just so happy you are here." I walked into the room. My stepfather, Gordon, was sitting in his recliner. My Aunt Clara and Uncle Dave were on the sofa. They all stopped talking and looked at me. Their expressions were identical masks of performative pity. "Hey, kiddo," Gordon said, not getting up. "Rough week, huh?" "Yeah," I said, sitting on the edge of the ottoman, keeping my back straight so the tape wouldn't crinkle. "Rough week. Well, you are safe here," Aunt Clara said, leaning forward to pat my knee. "That is what matters. You are with family." I looked around the circle of faces. I saw the papers sitting on the side table next to Gordon, a thick stack of legal documents, clipped together. The trap was set. The bait was the roast beef. The cage was the concern. I took a breath and mentally pressed the record button in my mind. "So," I said, looking at my mother, "what is the plan?" My mother smiled, and it was the sharpest thing in the room. "We just want to help you get back on your feet. Madeline," she said, reaching for the papers. "We have it all figured out. Let them talk," Tessa had said. "Let them dig their own grave." "Okay," I said softly. "I'm listening." The living room was warm, suffocatingly so. It smelled of roasting meat and furniture polish, a sensory combination that instantly transported me back to being 16 years old and in trouble for something I had not done. The house was perfect, too perfect. There were fresh flowers in a crystal vase on the mantelpiece. The American flag on the front porch had been unfurled to catch the slight breeze. Even the throw pillows on the sofa were dented just so, suggesting a casual comfort that did not exist in this home. It was a stage set, and we were the players. I sat on the ottoman, my hands folded in my lap, feeling the cold, hard square of the digital recorder pressed against the small of my back. It was the only thing anchoring me to reality. Around me, the audience had taken their seats. Aunt Clara sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching a tissue she did not yet need, her eyes wide with a practiced concern. Uncle Dave sat next to her, looking uncomfortable, staring at his boots, as if hoping they would sprout wings and carry him away. And then there were the directors. My mother, Lorraine, was pacing in front of the fireplace. She wore a soft cashmere sweater in a shade of pale blue that made her look maternal and harmless. Gordon, my stepfather, sat in his leather recliner, the throne from which he had issued judgments for 20 years. He was not looking at me. He was looking at a thick manila envelope on the side table. "I am glad we are all here," Lorraine began. Her voice was trembling slightly, a perfect vibrato of suppressed emotion. She looked at Aunt Clara, then at Uncle Dave, cementing her alliance before she even looked at me. "We have been so worried about Madeline. The last few days have been well. They have been a nightmare for all of us." I said nothing. I kept my face blank, my breathing shallow. Let them talk. Tessa had said, be a stone. The fire was a tragedy, Lorraine continued, finally turning to face me. She looked at me with eyes that were wet with unshed tears, but beneath the gloss, I saw the hard, flinty look of a shark checking for blood. But what has happened since the fire is even more heartbreaking. We think Gordon and I think that the trauma has been too much for her. She paused for effect. The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Madeline has been saying things, Lorraine whispered, leaning in toward her sister. Terrible things. Clara, she has been confused. She called me the other day talking about investigators who do not exist. She thinks people are following her. She thinks, oh, it hurts to even say it. Say it, Lorraine, Gordon said, his voice deep and grave. The family needs to know. Lorraine took a deep breath, clutching her hands to her chest. She thinks we had something to do with the fire. She thinks her own parents would hurt her. Aunt Clara gasped. She looked at me, her eyes filling with horror. Maddie, is that true? Did you say that? I looked at Aunt Clara. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her about the duffel bag and the smart plug and the 2 hours and 40 minutes. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to let the lie fully form before I could shatter it. I am just trying to understand what happened to my home, I said quietly. My voice was steady, which I knew would irritate my mother. She wanted me to shout. She wanted me to deny it hysterically. See, Lorraine said, gesturing at me with an open palm. She is dissociated. Look at her. She is sitting there like a statue. That is shock. Clara, that is a psychotic break. She has invented a conspiracy because the reality that she left a candle burning is too painful for her to accept. I did not leave a candle burning, I said. You did, Gordon snapped. The fire department report said it was likely electrical or accidental misuse. But you can't accept that, can you? You need a villain. He leaned forward, his leather chair creaking. We had to call her employer, Gordon said, addressing Uncle Dave. We had no choice. She was becoming a danger to herself. We didn't want her to have a breakdown in the middle of a client meeting. They agreed she needs immediate psychiatric leave. You lost your job? Uncle Dave asked, finally looking at me. I am on administrative leave, I corrected. Because of her mental state, Lorraine added quickly. And that is why we are here. Madeline, we cannot let you destroy your life. We cannot let you wander around the city, homeless and paranoid, making accusations that could get you sued for slander. We are your parents. We have to step in. She walked over to the side table and picked up the envelope. She held it like it was a holy text. We have spoken to a lawyer, Lorraine said. A family friend. He agrees that you need a period of rest, a period where you don't have to worry about money, or insurance, or legal battles. She pulled out a stack of papers. They were clipped together with a heavy black binder clip. What is that? I asked. This is a solution, Lorraine said, placing the stack on the coffee table in front of me. She pushed it forward with a manicured finger. I looked down at the top page. The text was dense, but the title was clear. Durable Power of Attorney for Financial Management. And underneath it, another document. Voluntary Leave of Absence and Resignation. And a third, Authorization for Inpatient Psychiatric Evaluation. My blood ran cold. They didn't just want the money. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to sign me into a facility, take control of my finances, and force me to resign from Glassline so I would have no resources to fight back. It was a total liquidation of my personhood. We want you to sign these, Lorraine said, her voice dropping to a soothing coo. Just for now, just until you are better, Gordon and I will handle the insurance claim. We will deal with the investigators. We will handle your bills. You just go to the facility in Boulder. It is a spa, really, very nice, and you rest. It is for your own good. Maddie, Aunt Clara said, sniffling, your mother is taking on such a burden for you. A burden, I repeated. A huge burden, Gordon said. Do you know how complex these insurance claims are? You are in no state to handle it. If you say the wrong thing to the adjuster, they will deny the claim and you will get nothing. We are trying to save your settlement. I looked at the papers, then I looked at the recorder taping my skin. I needed them to say it. I needed the connection. So, I said slowly, if I sign this, you get control of the insurance money? We get to manage it for you, Lorraine corrected, to make sure it is used for your treatment and your new home. You can't be trusted with large sums of money right now. Madeline, you are not well. And the policy? I asked. The renter's insurance policy? What about it? Lorraine's eyes narrowed slightly. It is a lot of money, I said. $75,000, plus the liability. It is standard coverage, Gordon said dismissively. Stop obsessing over the numbers. This is about your health. I took a deep breath. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it. The moment Tessa had prepared me for. The moment I stopped being the daughter and started being the prosecutor. I looked directly at my mother. I locked eyes with her. Mom, I said, my voice clear and loud enough for the microphone to catch every syllable. If you are only doing this to help me, if you only want to manage the money because I'm sick, then why did you change the beneficiary on my policy to yourself 4 months ago? The silence that followed was not the silence of a pause. It was the silence of a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Aunt Clara stopped sniffling. Uncle Dave looked up sharply. Lorraine froze. Her hand, which had been reaching out to pat my shoulder, stopped in midair. Her face went slack, the mask of concern slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal sheer, unadulterated panic. What? Aunt Clara whispered. Lorraine, what is she talking about? I don't know, Lorraine stammered, pulling her hand back. She laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. See? This is what I mean. The paranoia. She is imagining things. I am not imagining it, I said, keeping my eyes on her. I went to the insurance office on Friday. They showed me the document, dated October 12th. Beneficiary, Lorraine and Gordon Parker, 100% payout, signed with my name. I turned to Gordon. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked. Or did you think the fire would destroy the records too? Gordon's face turned a mottled shade of red. He stood up, his fists clenching. You are lying. You are a liar. Madeline, you are trying to turn the family against us. Show me the policy then, I challenged. If I am lying, log into the account right now. Let's show Aunt Clara the beneficiary page. We do not have to show you anything, Lorraine snapped, her voice losing all its sweetness. The venom was leaking out now. This is exactly why you need to be committed. You are twisting reality. You signed that paper. You begged us to be on the policy because you were afraid of living alone. I begged you? I asked. I begged you to take the money if my house burned down? You are sick, Lorraine shouted, abandoning the worried mother act entirely. She stepped closer to me, looming over the ottoman. You are ungrateful, and you are sick. You are going to sign these papers. Madeline, you are going to sign them right now, or so help me God. I will have the police drag you to the psych ward myself. Is that a threat? I asked softly. It is a promise, she hissed. You have no job. You have no home. You have nothing unless we give it to you. Do you think anyone will believe you? A lonely single woman who sets her own apartment on fire for attention? We are saving you from prison, you stupid girl. Lorraine, Aunt Clara cried out, shocked by the sudden change in tone. Shut up, Clara, Gordon barked. He moved toward me, his physical presence looming large. He was using intimidation now. The stage play was over. This was a mugging. Pick up the pen, Gordon said, pointing to the documents. Sign the power of attorney. We are done playing games. You forged my signature, I said, looking up at him. And you planted the device. I know about the bag. Mom, I saw the video. Lorraine's face went white. What video? The hallway video, I said. 2 hours and 40 minutes. You went in with a full bag. You came out empty-handed." "That is illegal," Lorraine stammered. "You can't see that." "I saw it," I said. "And I know about the smart plug." The room was vibrating with tension. Gordon looked like he was about to strike me. Lorraine looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting around the room, looking for a weapon or an exit. "You listen to me," Lorraine said, her voice low and dangerous. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my flesh. "You are going to sign this, and you are going to keep your mouth shut. If you try to fight us, we will bury you. We will make sure you never work again. We will make sure every doctor in this state says you are insane." "Let go of me," I said. "Sign it," she screamed, shaking me. "I need to think about it," I said, pulling my arm away. "There is no thinking," Gordon roared. "You sign it now." The brutality of it hung in the air. Aunt Clara was sobbing openly now, terrified by the monsters her sister and brother-in-law had become. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood. "I am leaving," I said. "You are not going anywhere," Gordon said, stepping between me and the door. "Sit down." "This is kidnapping," I said. "If you don't let me leave, it is kidnapping." "It is an intervention," Lorraine shrieked. "We are your parents." "You are not my parents," I said. "You are the beneficiaries." Gordon reached out to grab me. He was going to force me back into the chair. I braced myself. I knew I had enough on the tape. I just needed to survive the next 30 seconds. And then, it happened. The sound was melodious, a generic two-tone chime that signaled the arrival of a neighbor or a delivery. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang. Gordon froze. His hand hovered inches from my shoulder. Lorraine whipped her head toward the hallway. "Who is that? Did you invite someone?" "No," Gordon said. "Ignore it." Ding-dong. Ding-dong. The ringing was persistent, urgent. "I'll get it," Uncle Dave said, standing up quickly. He wanted out of that room. He looked like he wanted to run. "Dave, sit down," Lorraine ordered, but Uncle Dave didn't sit down. He walked to the hallway. He opened the front door. We heard a voice, a deep, gravelly voice that I knew better than my own heartbeat in that moment. "Good afternoon. Is Madeline Knight inside?" "Yes," Uncle Dave stammered. "She's in the living room. I am Jonah Mercer, Fire Investigation, and these are officers from the Ridgehaven Police Department." I saw the color drain from Gordon's face. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see a victim. He saw the trap. "You," Lorraine whispered, staring at me with a look of pure betrayal. "You set us up." "No." "Mom," I said, reaching behind my back and peeling the tape off my skin. I pulled the small black recorder out and held it up. The red light was still blinking, steady and unblinking. "I just let you speak." The silence that followed my revelation was shattered not by a scream, but by the heavy, authoritative thud of boots on the hardwood floor. Jonah Mercer did not wait for an invitation. He stepped past a stunned Uncle Dave, filling the hallway with a presence that was colder and harder than the winter wind outside. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers from the Ridgehaven Police Department moved with practiced efficiency, their hands resting near their belts, their eyes scanning the room for threats. The air in the living room changed instantly. The smell of roast beef and furniture polish was replaced by the metallic, sterile scent of the law. The stage play was over. The house lights had just been turned on, revealing the wires and the trapdoors. "Lorraine Parker," Jonah said. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Gordon Parker, I have a warrant for your arrest." Lorraine stood frozen near the fireplace. Her hand was still extended toward me, fingers curled into a claw where she had been gripping my arm just seconds before. She looked at Jonah, then at the officers, and then her eyes snapped back to me. For a moment, she looked like a glitching computer program, her face cycling through expressions, confusion, rage, terror, before settling on a mask of indignant outrage. "This is absurd!" she shrieked, the sound tearing at her throat. She pointed a shaking finger at me. My daughter is mentally unstable. She is having a psychotic episode. You cannot burst into my home based on the ravings of a sick girl. We are not here because of your daughter's word. Mrs. Parker, Jonah said. Stepping into the center of the room, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He held it up, not like a piece of paper, but like a weapon. We are here because of the math, and the math does not lie. Get out of my house, Gordon bellowed. Standing up from his recliner, he tried to summon the bluster he had used on me his entire life, the intimidation of a large man used to getting his way. I know my rights. You have no grounds here. This is a private family matter. Sit down, Mr. Parker, one of the uniformed officers said. It was a command, not a request. Gordon blinked, the air rushing out of him as the officer stepped closer, hand hovering over his cuffs. Gordon sat. Jonah turned his gaze to the audience, my Aunt Clara and Uncle Dave, who were huddled together on the sofa, looking like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to know the grounds? Jonah asked, his eyes locking on Lorraine. Let us talk about the timeline. Mrs. Parker, you told the insurance adjuster you were in the apartment for 10 minutes. You told your daughter you were just dropping by, but the building entry logs say you were there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed. The logs are wrong. Electronics glitch all the time. Logs can glitch, Jonah conceded, his voice dripping with a terrifying calm. But cameras do not. We have high-definition video of you entering the building at 11:15 with a large black duffel bag on your shoulder, heavy, full. He took a step closer to her. And we have video of you leaving at 1:55, no bag, empty-handed. I left some old clothes for her. Lorraine stammered, desperation creeping into her voice. I donated them. That is not a crime. We found the bag, Jonah said. The sentence hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Lorraine went dead still. What? You didn't leave it in the apartment to burn, did you? Jonah said, shaking his head with a look of mock disappointment. You got nervous. Maybe you thought the accelerant would not consume the zipper. Maybe you thought the fire marshal would find the synthetic fabric fused to the floor. So you took it out of the apartment, but you couldn't walk out to the car with it because the plan was to leave empty-handed. So you dumped it. He pulled a plastic evidence bag from his other pocket. Inside was a photo. The trash chute in the service corridor, Jonah explained to the room. You threw it down the chute. You thought it would go into the compactor and be crushed into anonymity. But the compactor was full. Mrs. Parker, it hadn't cycled since Tuesday morning. The superintendent found a black duffel bag sitting right on top of the pile. Lorraine made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. And inside the bag, Jonah continued, relentless. We found the packaging for a brand new smart plug. We found a receipt from the hardware store on Elm Street, dated 2 weeks ago, paid in cash, but with a loyalty card scan. Gordon Parker's loyalty card. Gordon made a sound now, a low groan, and put his head in his hands. And just to be thorough, Jonah said, we dusted the packaging. We found 2 sets of prints, yours, Lorraine, and yours, Gordon. No, Aunt Clara whispered. She stood up, her hands trembling. Lorraine, is this true? Did you try to burn Maddie's place? They are lying, Lorraine screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound. She abandoned the motherly facade entirely. Her face twisted into a snarl, her lips peeling back from her teeth. She did it! Madeline did it! She is the one who needs money. She hates us. She planted the bag. We also have the witness from the insurance agency, Jonah interrupted, his voice cutting through her hysteria. The clerk identified you. Lorraine, she picked you out of a lineup. She remembers your perfume. She remembers you forging your daughter's signature on October 12th. I was helping her, Lorraine shouted, flailing her arms. She is incompetent. She can't manage her own life. I had to secure the assets. Secure the assets, I repeated quietly. The words felt heavy on my tongue. Is that what I am to you? Mom? An asset? You are ungrateful, she spat at me, lunging forward. An officer caught her by the arm, restraining her. "We fed you. We clothed you. And this is how you repay us? By bringing the police into our home? You selfish little—" "That is enough," the officer said, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. The click of the metal was the loudest sound in the world. Lorraine struggled, kicking out. "Gordon, do something. Tell them." Gordon looked up. His face was the color of old ash. His phone had been vibrating on the side table for the last minute. Buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. "My phone," Gordon said weakly. "It is the station. They called me." "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, and identity theft," the second officer said, pulling Gordon out of the chair. Gordon didn't fight. He didn't scream. He crumbled. He looked at me, his eyes wet and terrified. "I didn't think you would be there," Gordon blurted out. The room went silent. Even Lorraine stopped struggling to stare at him. "What?" I whispered. "The timer," Gordon stammered, the words spilling out of him like vomit. "The timer was set for 4 a.m. I told her you usually stay at that boyfriend's place on Tuesdays. I thought the apartment would be empty. I swear. Maddie, I didn't want to hurt you. I just have so much debt, the gambling I owe people." "Shut up. Gordon!" Lorraine shrieked. "Shut up, you idiot!" "I didn't think the fire would spread so fast," Gordon cried, tears streaming down his face as the officer cuffed him. "It was just supposed to be the living room, just enough to claim the contents. I didn't know the whole building would go." "You risked my life for debt?" I asked. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching this from a great distance. "You set a fire while I was sleeping because you needed to pay off a bookie?" "We would have shared it with you," Gordon sobbed. "We were going to give you some to help you move." "Oh my God," Uncle Dave said. He looked like he was going to be sick. He turned to Lorraine, who was now panting, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild. "Lorraine, you are a monster." "I am a mother," Lorraine yelled, fighting against the officer's grip. "I did what I had to do. Madeline is useless. She never helps us. She sits in that city with her fancy job and lets us drown. It was my money. I raised her. It was my return on investment." Return on investment. That was it. The core of it. I wasn't a person. I was a stock that hadn't paid dividends. So they decided to liquidate. "Take them out," Jonah ordered. The officers marched them toward the door. Lorraine was still screaming, hurling insults, blaming me, blaming Gordon, blaming the world. Gordon was weeping, a pathetic, broken man who had traded his stepdaughter's safety for a chance to clear a ledger. I watched them go. I saw the neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their phones out, filming the spectacle. I saw the flashing lights of the cruisers reflecting off the pristine white snow. When the door closed, the silence that rushed back into the house was ringing. Aunt Clara collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Uncle Dave stood by the window, staring out, his back rigid. I stood in the middle of the living room. I looked at the power of attorney documents on the table. Voluntary leave of absence, inpatient psychiatric evaluation. They had been 5 minutes away from winning. If I had been the daughter they thought I was, the scared, obedient girl, I would have signed. I would be in a facility right now, medicated and silent, while they spent the insurance money on Gordon's debts and Lorraine's delusions. I reached behind my back and unclipped the recorder. I placed it on top of the legal papers. It was a paperweight of truth. "Maddie," Aunt Clara sobbed, looking up at me. Her face was streaked with mascara. "We didn't know. Please, you have to believe us. We thought she told us you were sick." "I know. Aunt Clara," I said. My voice sounded tired. I didn't feel anger toward her. She was just another prop in Lorraine's play. "It is okay." "It is not okay," Uncle Dave said. Turning around, his voice was thick with anger. "It is unforgivable. I am going to call the rest of the family. Everyone needs to know what they did." "Do what you have to do," I said. I walked toward the door. I needed air. I needed to get the smell of roast beef and gardenia out of my nose. Jonah was waiting for me on the porch. He was leaning against the railing, watching the patrol cars pull away. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "You did good," he said. "I don't feel good," I admitted. "I feel hollow." "That is normal," Jonah said. "Adrenaline leaves a hole when it goes. But you survived. Madeline, you walked into the fire twice, and you walked out both times." He reached into his pocket and pulled out another folded piece of paper. "There is one more thing," he said. "The judge signed 2 warrants this morning, one for the arrest and one for a search." He gestured to the house behind me. "Now that they are in custody, my team is going to turn this place inside out. We are looking for financial records, the computer they used to hack your account, and any other evidence of the fraud." "You will find plenty," I said. "We might find something else, too," Jonah said softly. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The duffel bag," Jonah said. "The one in the video. It was full when she went in. It was empty when she came out. But Lorraine didn't leave empty-handed because she dumped the bag. She left empty-handed because she wanted to look innocent." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But think about the timeline. Madeline, she was in your apartment for nearly 3 hours, alone. She knew she was going to burn it down. She knew everything in that room was going to be ash." "Yes," I said. "Total loss." "Criminals like Lorraine, they are greedy," Jonah said. "They don't like to waste things. If she saw something valuable, something she could sell, or something she just wanted, she wouldn't leave it to burn." He pointed to the detached garage at the end of the driveway. The officers did a quick sweep of the garage before they came in, just to secure the perimeter. They saw a stack of plastic bins in the corner, freshly taped. I felt a spark of something in my chest. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was curiosity. "You think she stole from me?" I asked. "I think she looted the site before she torched it," Jonah corrected. "I think she took the things she thought were too good for the fire. The jewelry, the electronics, maybe even the photos." My hand flew to my mouth. The photos, the box of pictures of my grandmother, the only thing I had truly grieved. "She kept them?" I whispered. "Why?" "Trophies," Jonah said darkly. "Or maybe leverage, or maybe just because she couldn't bear to destroy something she could own. We are going to open those bins, Madeline, and if your things are in there, we are going to give them back to you." I looked at the garage. It was a mundane, white-painted building. But suddenly, it looked like a treasure chest. My mother had tried to take everything. She had tried to take my home, my reputation, my sanity, and my freedom. She had burned my world to the ground to cover her tracks. But her greed had been her undoing. In her arrogance, she had saved the evidence of her own theft. She had preserved the very things she used to hurt me. I looked at Jonah. For the first time in a week, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who realizes the war is over, and the enemy has accidentally left the keys to the prisoner's cell on the table. "Open the bins," I said. "I want to see what she saved." Jonah nodded. He signaled to the remaining officer. I stood on the porch and watched them walk toward the garage. The wind was still cold, but the sun was breaking through the clouds. The house behind me, the perfect suburban stage, was silent now. The actors were gone. The audience was weeping, and I was still standing. I took out my phone. I had one text message to send. To Hannah. "It's done. I'm coming home." I didn't mean the apartment. I didn't mean the house behind me. I meant the place where people didn't burn you for money. I meant the future. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where that was. The garage was cold, smelling of gasoline and old dust, a sharp contrast to the heated drama that had just played out in the living room. I stood by the door, hugging my arms around my chest, watching Jonah Mercer and the remaining officer cut through the packing tape of a gray plastic storage bin. It was a standard bin, the kind you buy at a big box store for $10. It was labeled in my mother's handwriting. The black marker script read simply, "Madeline, donations." Jonah ripped the lid off. I stepped forward, my breath hitching in my throat. I expected to see junk. I expected to see old clothes or broken appliances, the kind of things people actually store in garages. Instead, I saw my grandmother. Lying on top of a pile of bubble wrap was the leather-bound photo album I thought had turned to ash 3 days ago. It was the album containing the only existing pictures of my father's mother, the woman who had taught me to play the piano before she passed. Beside it was my jewelry box, the wooden one with the pearl inlay, and underneath that, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was the hard drive I used for my personal backups. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the leather cover of the album. It was cool to the touch. It was real. "She stole them," I whispered. The realization made me feel physically ill, a nausea that rolled through my stomach like a wave. "She didn't just burn the apartment. She went shopping in it first." Jonah picked up the hard drive, turning it over in his gloved hands. "This explains the timeline," he said, his voice grim. 2 hours and 40 minutes. I couldn't figure out why she stayed so long just to plant a timer. But this takes time. She had to sort through your things. She had to decide what was worth saving and what was trash. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. "Why save the photos?" She hated my grandmother. She called her a meddling old woman. "Control," a voice said from the driveway. I turned to see Tessa Wainwright walking up the path. She had arrived just as the police were taking my parents away, and she had stayed back to talk to the officers. Now, she stood looking at the bin with a look of disgusted understanding. "It is the ultimate insurance policy, Madeline," Tessa said, stepping into the garage. "Think about it. If you ever got suspicious, or if you ever complained too loudly about losing everything, she would produce this bin. She would say, 'Look, sweetie, I found these safe and sound. You were so hysterical you must have misplaced them.' She would play the hero. She would give you back your own memories and expect you to be grateful. And," Jonah added, "it minimizes the claim if she needs it to. If the insurance company started asking questions about the value of the contents, she could miraculously find the high-value items to lower the heat. She was hedging her bets." I looked at the bin. It wasn't a collection of saved items. It was a collection of leverage. My mother had looked at my life, categorized it, and decided which parts she could use to manipulate me later. "Take it all," I said to the officer. "Log it as evidence. I don't want to touch it until the trial is over." The trial was not the sensational television event my mother probably imagined she was starring in. It was a series of quiet, sterile hearings in courtrooms that smelled of floor wax and boredom. Tessa was right about the paper trail. Once the forensic accountants got into my parents' finances, the story unraveled with pathetic speed. Gordon's gambling addiction was not a secret vice. It was a gaping black hole. He owed $60,000 to a sports book in Nevada and another $40,000 to credit card companies. They were drowning. They had looked at my renter's insurance policy not as a safety net for me, but as a winning lottery ticket for them. The district attorney did not offer mercy. He offered math. Lorraine Parker pleaded guilty to first-degree arson, insurance fraud, and aggravated identity theft. She took the plea deal because Tessa had lined up 5 witnesses, including the clerk from the hardware store and the notary she had tricked. The evidence was a wall she could not climb over. She was sentenced to 8 years in state prison. Gordon Parker took a different deal. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy and reckless endangerment because he cooperated and gave up the details of the timeline. His sentence was lighter, 4 years, with mandatory addiction treatment. I sat in the back row during the sentencing. I didn't make a victim impact statement. Tessa had advised against it, saying that my silence would hurt my mother more than any words. She was right. When the judge read the sentence, Lorraine turned to look at me. She was searching for a reaction. Tears, anger, anything to prove she still had power over me. I gave her nothing. I looked at her with the same polite, detached interest I would give to a stranger on a bus. I saw her face crumble, not because of the prison time, but because she realized she was no longer the main character in my life. The insurance money came 2 weeks later. It was a wire transfer. Beacon Shield. After reviewing the police reports and the court documents, reinstated me as the sole beneficiary. They paid out the full policy limit for the structure liability and the contents. After Tessa's legal fees, which were substantial but worth every penny, I had enough money to start over. I didn't buy a house. I didn't want to be tied down yet. I rented a new apartment in a high-rise building on the other side of the city. It was on the 12th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a 24-hour concierge. But the first thing I bought wasn't furniture. It was a lock. I hired a private security firm to install a reinforced deadbolt and a camera system that I controlled. No guest codes, no spare keys for family. The only person who had access to my sanctuary was me. Work was the final hurdle. I walked into Glassline Risk Solutions on a Tuesday morning. Exactly 1 month after the fire, the office was buzzing with the usual noise of ringing phones and typing when I stepped off the elevator. The conversation stopped. Karen from HR met me at the door. She looked flushed and embarrassed. "Madeline," she said, wringing her hands. "We are so glad to have you back. I wanted to formally apologize for the misunderstanding regarding the anonymous tip." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen," I said, my voice cool. "It was a weaponized compliance report sent by a woman who is now a convicted felon. You allowed an external party to manipulate company policy to discredit an employee." Karen flinched. "We were following protocol for risk assessment." "I know," I said. "I write the protocols, and that is why I know exactly where the system failed. I will be returning to my desk, but I have a condition." "Anything," Karen said. "My personal file is locked," I said. "No information about my address, my emergency contacts, or my health status is to be released to anyone without my written consent. If a family member calls, they are to be told I do not work here. If an inquiry comes in, it goes to legal. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear," Karen said. I walked to my desk. My colleagues looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I didn't mind. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started working on the Ohio construction model. I was good at assessing risk. But now, I knew that the biggest risks didn't come from failing cranes or flooding rivers. They came from the people who said they loved you. That weekend, Hannah came over to help me unpack. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by boxes. "You know," Hannah said, taking a bite of pepperoni, "Aunt Clara called me." "Did she?" I asked, not looking up from the book I was shelving. "She wants to send you a housewarming gift. She says she's really sorry she didn't believe you." "Tell her to donate it to a burn unit," I said. "That is cold," Hannah said, but she was smiling. "It is clear," I corrected. "I got a permanent restraining order against Gordon and Lorraine, but I also drew a line with the rest of them. Anyone who sat in that living room and watched me get ambushed is on the other side of the line. I don't need their guilt gifts. I need their absence." "Fair enough," Hannah said. She raised her soda can. "To boundaries." To walls," I said, clinking my can against hers. "High ones." The next morning, I went to the mailbox in the lobby. There was a single white envelope. It had a correctional facility return address, stamped in red ink. My heart did a familiar stutter step, but it settled quickly. I took the envelope upstairs. I sat by the window, looking out at the city skyline, and sliced it open. The letter was written on lined yellow paper. My mother's handwriting was as loopy and elegant as ever, untouched by the gray reality of her cell. "My dearest Madeline, I hope you are happy. I sit here every day thinking about you. I know you are angry, and I forgive you for that. We all make mistakes. I just wanted to save us. Sweetie, I wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Gordon is weak, but I was only ever thinking of you. Please don't forget that I am still your mother. You only get one. I will be waiting for your letter. I know you will come around eventually. You need me. Love, Mom." I read it twice. The gaslighting was so ingrained in her, it was like a reflex. She forgave me. She was thinking of me. She was the martyr in a jumpsuit. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion. She would never change. She would spend 8 years in that cell rewriting the story until she was the victim and I was the villain who put her there. I walked to my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I picked up a pen. I didn't write, "Dear Mom." I wrote, "To Madeline, you survived the fire. You survived the betrayal. You survived the people who were supposed to protect you. You learned the hardest lesson of all. Biology is an accident, but family is a choice. You do not owe anyone your safety. You do not owe anyone your sanity. Love is not a transaction, and family is not ownership. You are not the things you lost. You are the person who walked out of the smoke. Keep walking." I folded the note and put it in my jewelry box, the one Jonah had rescued from the garage. I took my mother's letter, walked to the kitchen sink, and held a lighter to the corner of the yellow paper. I watched the flame catch. It curled the paper, turning the elegant lies into black ash. I dropped it into the sink and watched it burn until there was nothing left but a smudge of carbon. Then I turned on the faucet and washed it down the drain. I dried my hands. I put on my coat. I had a meeting with Jonah Mercer. We were going for coffee, not as investigator and victim, but as two people who understood that sometimes. You have to sift through the ashes to find the truth. The title of my life for the last month had been a headline, "After My Apartment Burned." My parents said, "Not our problem," but as I walked out of my building and into the crisp, clean air of a new season, I realized the headline was wrong. It wasn't their problem anymore, and it wasn't mine. The fire had taken my furniture, my clothes, and my sense of naive security, but it had also burned down the illusion I had been living in for 32 years. The investigator had arrived, and he hadn't just determined the cause of the fire. He had determined the cause of my pain. The fire was out, the smoke had cleared, and for the first time in my life, I could breathe. Thank you so much for listening to Madeline's story. If this story made you feel the heat of the fire and the chill of the betrayal, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the map. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear the truth about what happens when the smoke clears. See you in the next story.